Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
Friends, I don't know what else you could want in a heavy-duty outdoor fixed blade knife. For those of you who are familiar with the Tracker style knife, you'll know that the Tracker is pretty much the only knife that can fairly be compared to the SXB. Obviously, the SXB was inspired by the Tracker. And why not? I mean, the Tracker is a great knife, and Rob Russin of Utah did the outdoors community a great service when he designed the tracker, and Tom Brown was very smart when he stole that concept from Rob Russin and then convinced the world that it was his idea all along. But E.J. Snyder and Tops improved upon the tracker and gave us a knife with which Rambo would love to finish some shit.
They drew first blood, not me.
So let's take a look at these two knives and see how E.J. Snyder and Tops knives improved upon the tracker. Okay, the first thing we notice is that the SXB is much larger and heavier than the tracker is. That alone is going to make the SXB much more effective at chopping. And that's the purpose of both of these two knives. I mean, they're both meant to be choppers. So, all things being equal, the SXB is going to be a much more efficient chopper than the tracker is. Now, while neither one of these knives are really meant to be an everyday carry belt knife, you can carry this tracker in a horizontal scout carry at the small of your back pretty comfortably, even if it's not the most comfortable thing on your belt. The SXB, though, is really just better off staying in the pack until it's time to come out and tear shit up. The SXB did ride pretty easily on the outside of my calf, but keep in mind, I'm 6'4" and I've got legs up to my neck. So at almost 1.5 feet long, you may not find that it rides so easily on your leg. The SXB features this very slight clip point as opposed to the straight spine of the tracker. That's going to make this SXB much better at breaching and stabbing, piercing tasks than what the tracker is capable of. Can you stab and pierce and breach into material with the tracker? Absolutely. The SXB just does it better with the spear point. That's all. And that is very, very handy when it comes time for that celebratory beer after a successful bow and drill friction fire ember. Both of these knives feature this very well-known and prominent toothy spine right here. The SXB has slightly larger teeth, a little bit more aggressive in my experience than the tracker. But also, the SXB places this toothy spine closer to the handle as opposed to the forward placement on the tracker. That is going to give you much better leverage because the force that you're applying is closer to those teeth. Those teeth are closer to your hand. So that's going to be a much, much better placement for those teeth. The toothy spine on this style of knife is probably the most misunderstood feature of the tracker style knife, or the SXB, or the Striker Defender tool, whatever. It's probably the most misunderstood feature of these knives. Some people are going to tell you this is a saw. Other people are going to tell you it's a notching tool. Other people are going to tell you it's great for breaking wires if you have to get through like a barbed wire fence or something. Other people are going to use it to pull a coffee kettle out of the fire pit. I like to think of it as a wood chipper. I mean, you saw how well the SXB grinded up that fat wood for tinder bundle for the ferro rod. You know what this is? It's a set of sharp, pointy teeth on the edge of your spine, or on the edge of your knife. So use it however it's going to function for you. That's all. I even heard one gentleman who did a video review of the SXB say that the toothy spine on the back of the SXB was really just for looks. I'll tell you this, nothing on the SXB is a one-trick pony, and I guarantee absolutely nothing on this knife is just for looks. Okay, the SXB features this hilt or finger guard or whatever you want to call it, with these holes on each side, as opposed to the Tracker. The Tracker is just a straight blade to handle transition with no finger guard there. These finger guards, and you'll have to forgive my cordage here. I've got a couple different lanyards here. This is normally just a Prusik lanyard here. I took the Prusik loop off for the long pole handle. But these two holes here on this finger guard, which the Tracker does not have, really lend themselves well to lashing cordage on. And you saw how useful that might be if you want to put like a longer handle on the SXB and really turn this thing into basically a machete. Again, you'll have to forgive my cordage here because I've got a couple lanyards on it. I need to put my Prusik loop back on my Prusik lanyard, but anyways, that's a whole nother topic. The SXB features this extended tang as opposed to the full tang that just ends at the scales on the Tracker. I love an extended tang. Some of my best friends are extended tangs. But not all extended tangs are created equal. Consider the size and shape of this extended tang on the SXB. It is perfectly sized and shaped for a spindle divot. For all of you guys and gals who like to practice bow and drill friction fires, this spindle right here is going to really come in handy. If nothing else, it's an extra piece of steel on your knife, and we all know an extra piece of steel is just another tool. So great improvement on the SXB over the Tracker. And notice also, with the size and shape of this extended tang on the SXB, it's not sharp. I mean, I'm pressing my finger onto it. It's not sharp. So when you are carving out your spindle divot in your fireboard, your bottom board, you're not really removing material from your hearth board. Typically, if we're going to carve out a spindle divot into our hearth board like this, okay, we're going to be removing material. It's not much material that we're removing, but we're still removing material. That material would otherwise be used as, you know, superheated dust for our ember. With the SXB, you're not removing anything. You're basically just pressing that material down like you would do with your finger into a ball of clay. That's it. I mean, it's a small detail, but it's a great improvement over the Tracker, in my opinion. All right, speaking of bow and drill friction fires, the SXB features a spindle divot right in the handle, this micarta handle, and the Tracker does not. It's got the screw holes in it, but the SXB has this spindle divot right here, and this is meant to be used as the top spindle divot for the top of your spindle, the sharpest point. Okay, it's a small detail, but the SXB allows you to bypass all that harvesting and preparation of a bearing block for the top of your spindle. Can you use the Tracker as a bearing block for a bow and drill friction fire set? Absolutely. For those of you who are interested, I've got a couple of short, like 2-minute videos on my channel where I demonstrated using another knife that did not have this spindle divot as a bow and drill friction fire bearing block. I just wrapped a piece of cordage around the handle and poked the pointy top into that cordage. But that's an extra step. With the SXB, it features that spindle divot right in there. And I mean, you saw earlier in the video that I used this handle on the SXB as a bearing block in my bow and drill friction fire set. Great improvement on the SXB over the Tracker. All right, the SXB features a Rocky Mountain tread handle as opposed to the classic style handle on the Tracker. In my experience, the Rocky Mountain tread handle gives me much better grip, especially if you throw lanyards onto that sucker. It gives me a much better grip over the Tracker. Now, I've heard some people say that the Rocky Mountain tread style handle causes them hot spots on their hands, and a hot spot will generally be on the padded portion of your palm. What I've also noticed is that those people who complain about hot spots on this knife or with any Rocky Mountain tread handle typically aren't using gloves, and they're not using lanyards. You can see on my knife, I've got a lanyard here, and I generally have a prusik loop on this piece of cordage here. That's another lanyard, and I've also got what I call a pinky lanyard down here at the bottom of the tang. So I've never had a problem with hot spots on my hands. And my belt knife is well, here's my belt knife right here. It's the Striker Defender tool. It's got the Rocky Mountain tread handle, and I use a pinky lanyard on it all the time, and I have never had problems with a hot spot. Also, the Rocky Mountain tread handle really lends itself well to cordage, and you saw how effective that might be if you want to lash something onto this handle. If you want to just give yourself a longer handle out here, as I did earlier in the video, or maybe you've got bear paws for hands and you want to wrap some paracord around this thing and give yourself a better fistful of handle. Whatever the case it is, the Rocky Mountain tread handle, in my opinion, is a great improvement over the classic style handle on the Tracker. Okay, both of these knives feature this very well-known small quarter round here that goes straight into this draw blade portion, and this quarter round on both of these knives is probably one of the defining features of the Tracker style knife, including the SXB, but it's also one of those features that really cause people to either love this style knife or to hate it. And I'll tell you, the biggest problem with this quarter round here on either one of these knives is the contour of it. It's the fact that it exists. A lot of people who are just getting into outdoor activities and learning how to use knives, learning how to sharpen knives, they will hate this style of knife because it can be somewhat difficult to sharpen this. Okay, we all want to, you know, make those curly fat wood piles and all of that other stuff like NW Primate does and all of that other stuff, but when it comes time to sharpen this, we're stuck on stupid. The simple answer to that is practice. You have to try. You can't be afraid to try. But with the SXB, the quarter round is much larger. I don't know if I can get a shot of it here, but it is a much larger contour. It still performs exactly the same way as the smaller quarter round, you'll still make those really curly fatwood piles and all of that other stuff, but the larger quarter round on the SXB is going to be much easier to sharpen. The trick to sharpening these is to get yourself a round file, a little Nicholson file or something like that, or maybe just a small dowel, with a piece of sandpaper wrapped around it or whatever, and just practice. You have to try. And when you get that down, when you can sharpen these edges here, man, this is going to be one of your favorite knives. I promise. You just have to try. Okay, the SXB comes from Tops, or pretty much any other seller, with a ballistic nylon sheath as opposed to the Kydex sheath that you're going to get if you buy the Tracker new. I prefer a ballistic nylon sheath, well, for a couple reasons. One is Kydex knife sheaths suck, and for another thing, with the ballistic nylon sheath that you get from Tops, you're going to get this extra capacity here, this pocket, okay? And that's great for carrying whatever you want to carry with your knife. If you want to carry a small sharpening stone or some dependable dry tinder, a ferro rod, whatever, that's what I carry in mine. I carry dependable dry tinder, fueled cotton, and a 1/2 inch by 5 inch ferro rod in here. But you can carry a small stone in there or whatever. With the Kydex sheath, you're not going to get that. Now, if you prefer Kydex to leather or nylon, whatever, you can get custom-made Kydex sheaths from different sellers on eBay. You're going to pay $130, $150 for those, but whatever. I think you've seen that the SXB can do everything that the Tracker can do and more when you consider the bow and drill friction fire features and the Rocky Mountain tread handle lending itself to cordage, and it does it better. I've said it probably 100 times before. The Tracker is a bull in a china shop, but the SXB is the dragon in the village. Having used the SXB for some time, seen how it performs, seen how it compares to other outdoor fixed blade knives, I have to ask myself what I would change. Really, if I have to be nitpicky, I would say really only two things. But would I change them? Really? The first thing is the clip point. I prefer, as on my belt knife, a spear point on pretty much all of my knives. The SXB has this very slight clip point, but considering the fact that the SXB is primarily a chopper, the clip point is the correct point for this knife. If you take this blade down to a spear point, then you're necessarily going to be sacrificing a few ounces of weight at the forward end of this blade. The spear point gives you superior piercing and stabbing ability over the Tracker, while maintaining those few ounces up front for chopping, which you would sacrifice with a spear point. So, while I do prefer a spear point, the clip point is the correct point for this blade. Also, I prefer on my knives to have more of a convex grind. On my belt knife, I've changed it from a Scandinavian grind to a convex. The SXB comes from Tops with a Scandinavian grind. In my experience, the Scandinavian grind doesn't work so well on harder materials, but the weight and length of the SXB really doesn't have a problem with harder materials, oak or whatever. So I'm not going to change the Scandinavian grind to a convex grind. That's a big blade. That's a lot of work to get that done. Maybe when it comes time to sharpen this knife, maybe I might put a convex grind on it, but it's not necessary at this point. So what would I change about the SXB? Absolutely nothing. So what is my overall assessment of the SXB? Well, I think that it is an outstanding one-tool option if that's what you're looking for. It is similarly priced to the Tracker. For either one of them, you're going to pay anywhere between $230 to $300. And at the same price point, given the additional functionality of the SXB, I think that this knife is the clear choice given the option between the SXB and the Tracker. It's such an awesome knife that not only did I buy one, but I bought 3 of them. Hey, in my defense, I was left unsupervised.